Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be here on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, Songhees Nisquamish First Nation. I just want to say that we've just completed the first cabinet meeting of the new government. It included old ministers, new ministers, a diverse group of British Columbians, all committed to serving, protecting essential services, making sure that we're helping businesses, individuals, and communities as we continue to struggle with COVID-19. At the outset, I want to say I want to pass on my condolences to the 457 families who have lost a loved one as a result of COVID-19, and to the many thousands of families who are struggling now with isolation, struggling with concerns and fears for their loved ones and their communities. Hope is on the way. Dr. Henry will be advising in more detail later on about the progress we're seeing in Canada and around the world when it comes to vaccines and the distribution of those vaccines. But at this point, we've got to continue to focus on keeping our hands clean, keeping our distances, making sure we're not gathering in large numbers, and of course, always wear a mask when you're indoors or in public spaces. The challenges ahead are significant. We know that. We've known that for many, many months. But as we get into December and look at the Christmas season and Hanukkah and other celebrations, we need to make sure that we keep those celebrations to an absolute minimum. There will be difficult times ahead for family gatherings. There'll be difficult times ahead for how we conduct ourselves as individuals, as families, as communities. But if we continue to focus on protecting each other, we'll come through this stronger than ever before. Next week, we will recall the Legislature to pass a couple of pieces of legislation, a small throne speech to highlight the events that we have ahead of us and how we plan to deal with those going into the new year, as well as passing supply for the $1,000 family benefit and the $500 benefit for individuals. There are a range of other issues I know they're topical and on the minds of the media and on the public. I'm happy to answer those questions at this time, but again, I just want to reiterate how proud I am of the vast majority of British Columbians who recognize that we are in a significantly challenging time, and you're all stepping up. So thank you for that. Let's keep doing it.
Reminder to reporters on the line, please press *1 to enter the queue. We go with one question and one follow-up today, and we're going to start off with Richard Zisman from Global.
Premier, one of the programs you had early on in the pandemic was support for childcare facilities to help save spots for parents. What we're hearing a lot of now that this program is gone, that some parents are being told that their child cannot come to daycare because they are feeling sick, and parents have to take sick days in many cases and are not being compensated for that. So why not implement a program where the daycares reimburse the parents when their kids cannot be there, and then the province reimburses the daycares? And what do you say to daycares and families who are stuck in this situation?
Well, I appreciate that proposal. I haven't had a formal proposal from the childcare sector. I know Minister Chen will be advising us. She is a member of the COVID working group of Cabinet. We'll be meeting this afternoon, the first meeting since the new Cabinet was sworn in. And if Minister Chen brings that forward, we'll give it serious consideration. We do know that the sick pay benefit that we work so hard with the federal government to establish has gaps and holes. And it's suggestions and solutions like those that have just been proposed that we want to bring to the federal government so we can work collaboratively with them to make sure that the services that people need are there for them when they need them, and also to make sure that those service deliverers are compensated for the work that they do. It's all critically important that we have this seamless approach to how we deal with sick time, how we make sure that people do not go to the workplace when they're not feeling well. That's how community transmission begins. We need to stem that as best as possible, but I'm happy to take that solution. I'm sure Minister Chen will be talking about it this afternoon.
Richard, do you have a follow-up?
You mentioned the federal program. There are, as you mentioned, significant gaps in it. My word's significant, not yours, but you can interpret it any way you want. But why not have provincial support to ensure that there are people who are being paid if they need to stay home due to illness? And it's not just, as you know, COVID-related illnesses. There's a requirement now by the province that employers must ask their employees to fill out a form before going to work. In many cases, workers are told you can't come into work today. They don't have virtual options, and therefore, in some cases, are being told to stay home and not getting paid for it. Why can't you fix that gap?
Well, I want to fix that gap, and those are the very things that we talked about with the federal government when we were putting in place or encouraging them to put in place a national program. I want to see the evidence, the data that demonstrates that there are examples such as the one that you've suggested, but we have been all along prepared to put in place our own program. We were grateful to the federal government for taking the national leadership that they did. And if there are gaps, as I say, and we can identify those by looking at the data and following through to see where we can fill those gaps, we're absolutely prepared to do that. We said, the former Minister Carol James and I said back in March and April, that this is the beginning, not the end, of our response to COVID-19. We heard from the federal government just this week that they have additional resources they're bringing to bear. We want to make sure that we're supplementing those, not duplicating those. So we want to make sure that when we're putting provincial resources into play to protect individuals, businesses, and communities, that we're doing it in a way that's not duplicating work, but in fact filling the gaps that exist. So we'll look at the evidence and we'll make decisions based on that.
Our next question is from Tom Fletcher, Black Press.
Hi, Premier. You mentioned the pandemic relief payments. We're seeing reports from Ottawa that $7 has already been spent for every dollar of private income that's been lost to the pandemic so far. Much of it going to people who have it in the bank because they didn't need it. I'm not asking about whether the next round will get out by Christmas. I'm asking, how is it prudent to do it at all?
Well, it's prudent to do it because it's putting dollars into people's pockets so that they can continue to get through the most challenging time British Columbians have ever known. This is going to be means tested. It's going to be low-income families and individuals who will get access to resources that they wouldn't have had otherwise, that are going to give them the ability to participate more in the economy by going to retail outlets, perhaps going out for a meal. That all stimulates economic activity. So the narrative of $7 spent for $1 return is a bit of an illusion, because as people spend this COVID benefit, there will be provincial sales tax that will be collected. There will be GST, or the federal tax will be collected, and it will create activity within the community. So we believe it's good economics. We campaigned on it. It was supported by certainly 48% of the population felt it was a good idea, and based on how they voted in the last election. And we think this is a cost-effective way to get dollars into people's pockets, those vulnerable populations with low and medium incomes, so that they can continue to not be overburdened with economic challenges. And just going back to the last question that was asked, if someone has to stay home and they don't have access to a sick pay benefit program, then this is going to be able to give them some comfort that they should not go to work when they're not feeling up to it, and then potentially carry COVID or some other infectious disease into the workplace. I think it's good. It's good government policy, and we're proud of it.
Do you have a follow-up, Tom?
Yeah, the Business Relief Fund is the last of the previous $5 billion allocated already. Can you give me a status update on that?
Well, I know there's a number of programs. New Minister Ravi Kahlon is responsible for jobs recovery and innovation. Ravi would have been briefed on all of the details on that this past week, and I would recommend, Tom, that you give Ravi a call. I'll let him know you're looking for him. He'll be able to give you a direct answer on what the state of play is in terms of the grants, the loan programs, the employee supplements that we put in place to encourage businesses to hire more staff to meet any demand, increased demand they may have because of their niche in the marketplace. So Ravi would have all that information, but we're confident that the dollars are rolling out. There were some glitches, of course. Criteria are always a challenge. Does every business fit? No, they don't. So do we amend the criteria to make sure more businesses fit? Yes, we do, and Ravi's working on that right now.
Our next question is from Binder Sajan, CTV.
Hi, Premier. I know that you have spoken out before about Transport Canada's rules saying that people have to leave their cars on certain car decks on ferries. And I'm wondering if you've been able to bring that up with the Prime Minister, and what did you tell him about the appropriateness of threatening ferry passengers who want to stay in their car with a $12,000 fine?
Well, I didn't realize it was $12,000, so that's new information for me. Thank you for that. I have talked to the Minister of Intergovernmental Relations, Dick LeBlanc. I've talked to the Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland, and I talked to the Prime Minister last week about this very issue. He committed to take this back to Minister Garneau, the Minister of Transportation, so that they can better understand that the BC ferries, by and large, travel on inland waters. We've had some horrific storms in the past 2 weeks where ferries have stayed in their berths. But by and large, I believe it's the greater of two evils. I would prefer that people stay in isolation in their car rather than going into a communal area where they could transmit or collect COVID-19. I made that clear to the Prime Minister. He absolutely understands that. But rules are in place not for the fun of it. They're in place for safety. I know BC Ferries has been working with Transport Canada to try and find a way to continue the exemption that was granted to us at the beginning of the pandemic. As we go into the second wave, where we're seeing, of course, we're reducing the amount of traffic on the ferries. The Prime Minister and I both acknowledged that. I also was talking to him about a national or a pan-Canadian message about staying in your own province, staying in your own community, so that we can curb or break the circuit of community transmission. And he agreed with me, and we both felt that perhaps by saying don't get on the ferry is the best course of action until we get this latest wave under control. But the federal government's absolutely aware of my views on this, made it clear to the highest levels, including the Prime Minister, and they're working on it. It's their responsibility. Marine safety, these are federal regulations. They're obliged to live up to them. I've made my case, and I'm hopeful that it'll win the day.
Do you have a follow-up, Binder?
Yes, I just wanted to ask also on care homes. There are some that are starting to looking to hire perhaps family members into their homes. And I know that before the election, you had made a commitment to hire up to 7,000 healthcare workers. Can you tell us where that program is at, or when you expect you will be ruled? Give us a status update.
Well, again, I would direct that question to Minister Dix, but I do know that the hiring is already underway. On the contact tracing side, we're over 1,000 now, which our initial commitment was somewhere around 600. We're up to 1,000 with more required as we see further outbreaks, particularly in Fraser Health, but not exclusively there. But when it comes to restaffing our long-term care facilities, that's part of a long-term plan, and it began in the summer when we made the commitment, and we're going to continue to do that. Adrian can give you the details of how many people have been hired, where they've been deployed. We need to do some training in many cases. We're trying to do that in an expedited manner, and I'm confident that our post-secondary institutions are up to that challenge. Particularly with the extraordinary year we've been having, we need to find ways to make sure we're training the appropriate people to do the appropriate work in long-term care, and it is a very, very high priority for the government.
Our next question is from Lisa Yuzda, News 1130.
Hi there, Premier. Back to sick pay for just a moment. I know you say you're working on it, but obviously our cases are extraordinary right now in the worst possible way. Is there nothing that can be done in the immediate for those people who have no access to paid sick time at their work, and the people who arguably need their wages the most and need it now when cases are at their height and people are getting ill?
Well, that's one of the reasons that we brought forward the COVID benefit, the $1,000 per family, $500 per individual. With respect to the National Sick Pay Program, it is in place, and as I said to a previous questioner, I believe that when the data demonstrates that there are gaps, the province is more than willing and prepared to step in. We made that clear at the outset in our discussions with the federal government. They decided in their wisdom, and I supported it, to go it on their own. They already have access to the employment insurance programs. They have a better understanding of the workplace than we do because of those national programs that everyone pays into and should benefit from. But we're ready to go. We had work done in the summer in anticipation that we would not have a national program, and we're prepared to dust that off and go right back to it. But I've not seen the evidence that I've heard twice today. That certainly piqued my curiosity. I'll go back and ask some questions of my own, and hopefully I'll have a better answer for you next week.
Do you have a follow-up, Lisa?
I do. Just you mentioned the holidays. You mentioned ferries and saying people maybe just don't travel, don't get on the ferries. Heading into holiday season, how important, I know that you're working with the feds on a program, a national program or some sort of national message. Just how vital do you think that is ahead of the holidays? You know, we're hearing people are still going away on weekends and getting arguments with their family because they're keeping their bookings when they're going into another community. Are you telling people, like when you're saying don't get on a ferry, are you telling people, you know, you need to just stay in your community, which it's going to hurt hotels, it's going to hurt other businesses? And are you hoping that the Prime Minister and other premiers are going to have that same message to people in the next few weeks?
Well, the message has been there for some time. Certainly the public health orders are pretty clear. If you don't need to travel, you shouldn't be traveling. That's the directive from public health. That's the directive from the provincial government. In my conversations with the Prime Minister about non-essential travel, those are messages that the Prime Minister has delivered as well, as have other premiers. What I guess I was looking for was a common purpose here, and although it exists, I don't think it has been articulated in a way, as you suggest, that people will really truly understand. This is a critical, dangerous time for British Columbia with respect to COVID-19. It's absolutely essential that we reduce our interactions with people who are not in our bubble or in our cohort or in our family or in our household unit. And I don't know how more clear we can be on that. And Dr. Henry and Minister Dix will be out again this afternoon with new numbers that will, I think, hopefully capture people's attention and the importance of listening to the advice that's been given, the direction and the orders that are in place, not just to protect themselves, but the people they care about, their immediate community, and of course, all British Columbians. It's really important. This is a very difficult point. The second wave is well and truly upon us. We see better results than our neighbors to the west, or to the east rather, and to the south, but that does not change the fact that we have a lot of COVID in communities on the island, in the interior, in the north, on the lower mainland, in Fraser, and in Vancouver Coastal Health. We need to all focus on that and stick to the basic activities that we are essentially required to do, and no more than that.
Our next question is from Tanya Fletcher, CBC.
Premier, active cases outside the Lower Mainland are currently doubling every 5 days. How concerning is this, and should the province be warning communities before they have dozens of cases, as was the case in Revelstoke last week?
Well, we have been, thank you for the question, we have been warning communities since March that COVID-19 is in British Columbia. We are in the midst of a global pandemic. There is no safe place. Nunavut has COVID-19. That was the last spot in Canada to have the virus arrive and to devastating consequences. We need British Columbians to understand that. The Revelstoke examples are people traveling unnecessarily for recreation. That's not acceptable. It was a bad choice, and we're living with those consequences. People need to be mindful of the choices that they make and the consequences they have, not just on themselves and their families, but other people as well. I think that message has been pretty clear. I'm happy to have the opportunity to say it again today. If you don't need to travel, you shouldn't be traveling. Stay in tight, confined bubbles until we can break this circuit of transmission in the community and get back to a place where we can start celebrating the arrival of vaccines as early as the first part of January 2021.
Tanya, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thanks. Many of the latest restrictions were set to be in place until at least December 7th. Is there any update on the at least part? What are the chances they'll be extended, and when might that happen?
Well, that'll happen next Monday. I'm confident of that. That's 2 weeks after the orders had been put in place. Dr. Henry and her team will look at the data. We're midweek now. We've got Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then into the weekend. We're hopeful we'll see a flattening of the curve. We're hopeful that the orders and the directives have been adhered to by British Columbians and that we will see some relief come Monday. But Dr. Henry will assess the data. She'll do her analysis. She'll brief the government, and decisions will be made at that time. I don't expect any significant changes between now and Monday.
Our next question is from Shannon Waters.
Hello, Premier. I wanted to go back to the paid sick leave again. In the spring, in a very short order, you managed to pass some legislation to change BC's requirements for 3 unpaid days. There are provinces that do require employees to provide paid days. Why are you not planning to make that change in the upcoming legislative session?
Well, we haven't seen the data other than the anecdotes I've heard today. No one's brought it to my attention at any event, and I'm going to be looking into that once I leave this podium. But the immediate concern was not to put more burdens on businesses that were already struggling. And so adding more paid sick days to their docket didn't seem to us to be the right way forward. When we worked with the Economic Recovery Task Force, which included the Chamber of Commerce, the Boards of Trade, BC Business Council, BC Federation of Labour, and others, we were all of one mind that paid sick leave was critically important to making sure that people did not, out of economic necessity, go to the workplace when they could be in a position to spread COVID-19. We all agreed on that, but we also all agreed that if we could reduce the cost to businesses to the greatest extent possible, that would be the best way forward. And that's why we started by working with the federal government, and that was the end of it, because the federal government said they would pick it up and provide appropriate numbers of sick days for individuals throughout the year. Now we're looking at or hearing evidence of the contrary. I'll look into it, and if we need to take steps, here's the good news. The legislature will be sitting next week, and we can take those steps.
Shannon, do you have a follow-up?
I do. I'm curious about the legislative session. The parliamentary calendar hasn't been updated yet, so I'm wondering how long you anticipate sitting. And also, aside from the supply bill needed for the recovery benefit, what are your legislative priorities going to be?
Well, the priority is, of course, getting the supply bill passed so that we can flow dollars to families and to individuals. But we're also going to make sure that if there's anything we need to do with respect to miscellaneous amendments or other legislation that needs to come forward, that's being worked on by a committee of cabinet right now. The legislative committee will be looking at that to see what we need to do. We don't have any anticipated additional legislation. We've been working, Minister Farnworth, with the House leaders of the official opposition as well as the Green Caucus to look at the agenda and how much time this will take. We don't anticipate the session going more than a week or two, and then we will begin to prepare for next year and hopefully a much better year than 2020 has been. I don't think that there's a person in British Columbia that is not waiting anxiously for the end of 2020 so that we can have some hope that the next year will be better than the one we've just experienced.
Our next question is from Andrew McLeod-Tyee.
Yeah, hi, Premier. In 2017, your mandate letter to your Citizen Services Minister had a couple instructions that were important. One was to improve access to information rules to provide greater public accountability, and the other was to improve response and processing times for FOI requests. Neither of those were in the mandate letter to your new minister last week, and I'm wondering why not.
Well, that's a good question. Those issues are still underway, as you know. We have made progress on making sure that access is more equitable across the board. We have had, as you know, you've heard briefings before, Andrew, a significant spike in requests from political parties. It's my view that those requests are not designed to improve understanding of the delivery of programs. It's not designed to ensure that privacy information is protected. They're designed for a political benefit, and we'll continue to work with that. I was a beneficiary of that as an opposition member. I understand it, but I would like to get back to first principles when it comes to freedom of information and protection of privacy, and that is for citizens, first and foremost, to be able to access their government to ensure that their information is being held confidentially and that they can access information about programs and the delivery of those programs. That was the intent and the principles that were in place when the NDP of the 1990s brought forward the FOI and privacy legislation, and that's what it should be today as well.
Do you have a follow-up, Andrew?
Yeah, on another mandate letter, your letter to the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions talked about working with the federal government to decriminalize simple possession of small amounts of illicit drugs for personal use. And it says, in the absence of prompt federal action, develop a made-in-BC solution. And I'm just wondering what's meant by prompt. How long are you willing to give it?
Well, I'm encouraged that the City of Vancouver has joined with us and the chiefs of police across the country to advocate to the federal government that they amend the criminal code. That's the intent. That's the objective of the mandate letter. You will know that we did initially in 2017 the Solicitor General gave a direction to law enforcement that we were not interested in prosecuting simple possession. That was our ability. That was something that we felt that we could and should do. We want to make sure that the federal government is working with us on these issues. We've had some positive conversations recently. I know Minister Farnworth and Minister Eby talked to their opposite numbers about why we believe this is important, not just for the symbolism of it, but also to reduce stigma so that we can focus on treatment, recovery, and making sure that we get on the right side of the other extraordinary public health crisis that British Columbians have endured now for coming on 6 years.
Our next question is from Rob Buffum, CTV2.
Oh, hi, Premier. What I'm wondering is, what is your message for businesses, especially tourism businesses, that have been waiting for 10 weeks for that grant money that had been promised them, some of whom are in dire straits right now and are just holding on? We've talked about the importance of the $1,000 for struggling families, but what about businesses that are in a very tough time right now?
We have some $300 million available for grants to businesses, including tourism operators, with a top-up specifically for tourism operators. We're going to be moving that we're continuing to move that as quickly as we possibly can. Minister Kahlon is responsible for that fund. I spoke yesterday with the chair of the tourism task force that was created at the request of the tourism sector. They had been given a mandate to respond and reply back to government by the end of the year. The chair, Tamara Vrooman from YVR, the Vancouver Airport Authority, formerly of Van City Credit Union, the CEO there. She's the chair of that group. I had a good, thorough briefing with her yesterday. They plan on issuing the report next week rather than waiting till the end of December. That will give us precious days in the legislature to make any changes that report may recommend. So I want to say at the outset that the task force, as I said, was requested by the industry. They rolled up their sleeves, they put themselves to work, and they're going to be presenting proposals and options to government as soon as next week. And I'm hopeful that there will be some grains of hope in that as well. But I think most tourism operators understand that we have had restrictions on travel internationally. Of course, we've had orders encouraging people to stay in their own communities. This is not good news for tourism. We tried our level best during the summer to make sure people stayed in British Columbia. They took their discretionary dollars and spent them at locations around BC. But as we come into the winter, in the depths of the second wave of COVID-19, this is a very difficult time for the tourism sector. Ski hill operators have been in discussions with Minister Dix. We'll keep those discussions going. The report will come next week, and we'll take whatever steps we can to keep the industry going with liquidity, with access to staffing resources and retraining, and a whole host of other initiatives that I'll know will be in their recommendations.
Do you have a follow-up, Rob?
I do, and it relates to Christmas. I think you've been quite clear about non-essential travel, being something people should avoid. But you've also said that on Monday, the current restrictions will be revisited. What is your message for people who are looking ahead to 3 weeks from today to Christmas and trying to make any plans, whether it's traveling or otherwise? Will there be a date, perhaps, where the province says, look, folks, this is the deal for Christmas, this is the way it's going to be? And if so, what might that date be?
Well, we're not that date yet, Rob, I guess is my simple answer. I am one of those Christmas Eve shoppers, so I tend to focus on Christmas about 24 hours before it arrives. I know that's me, that's not everybody. I know there are a lot of families that are concerned about the type of year we've had and had looked with some hope to the Christmas break and to perhaps a celebration of a new year. I can't give an answer on that right now other than to say we have hope on the horizon in the form of vaccines approved in Britain today. Federal government is working on the final stages of approvals for here in Canada. We have on order significant amounts of vaccine that will be distributed in a way that's most advantageous to vulnerable populations, healthcare workers, and so on. Dr. Henry's working with national authorities on that. When those details are finalized, we'll make those public. But I can't give an answer to how people will be celebrating Christmas this year today, but I know we will in the days and weeks ahead.
We have time for one more today. That will come from Rob Shaw, Vancouver Sun.
Oh, hey, Premier. I was just looking at the mandate letters on the issue of Metro Vancouver Transit, and I was sort of struck by how funding for TransLink, the issue of infrastructure and infrastructure grants is being handled by your transportation minister. Planning and policy is being handled by your environment minister, and your minister of state, Bowen Ma, is tasked with certain projects like the Massey and the Patello. And I just wondered why split that into three different areas, and what are you hoping to accomplish by kind of having three different people on three different parts of such a very big file?
Yeah, well, good question. And it was in different places last time as well. Minister Robinson was responsible for municipal affairs, TransLink, and housing. The objective there was to make sure that as we built out public transportation, we were able to plan the density in our cities, our major urban centers, that would be required to justify the extension of the SkyTrain, make it cost effective, and also ensure that it was meeting our climate change objectives. With respect to moving it to Minister Heyman this time, it was with that very purpose still in mind, that as we look to ways to get people out of their vehicles to reduce their emission profile, as we look at ways of building density so that we can reduce the footprint, the impact of housing by building new, modern, state-of-the-art housing that has green filters on virtually every step of the way, all of those can be best managed by the minister responsible for climate strategies. And when it comes to Minister Bowen Ma, she's an engineer. She worked on major projects at YVR as her job before she was elected. So to take her expertise, to join that up with Minister Fleming at Transportation, was a way to ensure that we had an engineer, since we had one in our caucus, who understood major projects, to be able to offer her advice and counsel, and to, quite frankly, translate some of the technical information that comes forward to ministers. That's not to say that Minister Heyman and Minister Fleming aren't capable and don't have capable staff to help them through this material, but to have Bowen's expertise, it seemed to me appropriate that we would take that expertise and put it to good use and good work to reduce our footprint, to assist our climate goals, and also to make sure we're getting cost-effective output from our major capital projects.
Do you have a follow-up, Rob?
Sure, thanks. A different subject. When the legislature comes back on Monday, the first task is going to be appointing a new speaker. That will mean that Speaker Plekas leaves before we know what is going on with this special prosecutor probe. We're two and a bit years into that. I just wondered if you could talk about that, having that speaker leave before we understand the results of the probe, whether you think that's satisfactory for the public confidence in the institution. And then also you talked about reforming the special prosecutor system so we're not stuck in the dark for so long, but you also have COVID to handle, and I know that that may not be a priority, but maybe you could sort of mention when and if we get to reforming that system in the future.
10 points Gryffindor for Rob Shaw asking three questions in the last question. Look, I agree with you that the events around the Legislative Assembly have been very troubling for me personally and for all British Columbians. I've made it clear, and you know this, I'll just say it for those who are unaware, that the Executive Council, of which I am the presiding officer, the Premier, does not direct the Legislative Assembly. It has its own management committee, the Legislative Assembly Management Committee, which is chaired by the Speaker. And the Speaker is selected by the new Parliament to be the chair for the period of that Parliament. Member Plekas is no longer a member of the Legislature. We will be nominating Raj Chauhan to be our designate to be the Speaker. We're hopeful that he will have unanimous support in the Legislature, and he will take up that position effective Monday. Now, the challenges of the report that was being supervised by Minister Plekas will be passed on to Raj Chauhan should he be designated by the Legislature to be the Speaker. And with respect to the special prosecutor, again, this is something that you and I have talked about in the past. It's something that's very frustrating for individuals who find themselves with a special prosecutor investigating something that they may not know anything about. We talked about that with respect to former Liberal cabinet ministers who were under a cloud for a long period of time, only to find no charges laid, and in some cases, not even understanding of what the charges were. That happened to my colleague Ginny Sims as well. No understanding of what the charges were. A cloud, and then that cloud was lifted with no real explanation as to why the cloud was there in the first place. I think that's a big problem with our special prosecutor system. But many people have said, yeah, there's problems with the system, but it's better than allowing or leaving it up to the general prosecution department to make decisions about people who are in potentially powerful positions. And that's the challenge we have with the Legislative Assembly. The clerk and others who are potentially under investigation by special prosecutors do, at the end of the day, should there be charges, have every right to representation and due process. But this is a challenging issue, and I don't have a solution for it yet. I've talked to Minister Eby, I've talked to Minister Farnworth, I've talked to others about what we could do to improve transparency so that those individuals who find themselves under investigation have some understanding of who brought forward the allegations, what are they substantive, are they without foundation. That, of course, happens at the end of the investigation, but it's a really unfortunate position to put anybody in, and this is Liberal, Conservative, NDP, Green, it doesn't matter. If you don't know who's making allegations and you don't know what the allegations are, that's just not fairness by anyone's measure, and I think we should try and do something about it. And we'll keep looking at it, and with respect to that specific case, I suspect that the Speaker's office will carry on. The Special Prosecutor will carry on as if there's been no change. They're looking at events that are in the past, not in the future.
Thanks, everyone. That's all the time we have.